Okay, so all we're doing from last unit's trig equation solving is we're adding one step at the start. So here it is. In this equation, do you see anything that is a formula sheet item?
Equals.
Sine 2b, that's the new thing. Is that on your formula sheet? Right here. Sine of the double angle. Okay? The letters don't matter, right? That doesn't matter. Sine of a double angle. So how do you replace that? Okay, so take that sine of a double angle and replace it using your formulas. Sine of a double angle. So you should be inserting a replacement of 2 sine b cos b. So do you see what I did? That is just a formula sheet replacement. Okay, that's all. That's all that's new. Now everything is old stuff. Okay, so solve it. Ready, here's my first question. What do I do with my algebra branch style stuff? Okay, your first question should be, do you have one or two different variables going on? You have two variables, so you can't isolate. What do you instantly do if you can't isolate? Equals 0. If you can't isolate, make it 0. Okay, now you go through your algebra branch. Next question would be, can you factor? Do you recognize it as a factoring style? It's not a simple trinomial because there's only actually two terms in it. It is. It's a GCF. So what could I take out of this first term and this second term? What would they have in common? Sine b bracket. So what do you have left here? Sine b times what? 1. Sine b times negative 2 cos b. Does that work? Would that multiply to that? Multiply to that? Okay, so sine b equals, what do you do there? Just 0, right? To have that multiplier 0, sine b would have to equal 0. Here, cos b would have to equal, this is kind of weird how we wrote it, but can you just think opposite number divide coefficient? That's always what you do, right? What do you get? Opposite number divide coefficient. Okay, now we're into trig mode. Okay, so that's the algebra branch. That's actually 2 points out of like 7, because that's all grade 11 stuff. You should know how to do algebra. So now, trig. My first question I ask myself is, do I recognize anything from the unit circle? That would be your first idea. Yes, I do. So where is sine 0? So where is there a y value of 0? Where would you ever see a height of 0? Right here and right here. That's where you would have answers. Heights of 0. Let's check out our question here. What does this tell me about my answer? It's in degrees. This is really weird. this symbol versus this symbol, what is going on? This says you could be equal to it, right? What about 360? Can we have 360 as an answer? No, because you can't, you have to be less than 360. So we could have 0 degrees as an answer. We could have 180 degrees as an answer. And then this could have been 360, but we're not allowed to answer 360 just because of the question. Okay, cos a half, boom, unit circle, recognize, right? So don't need my calculator for any of this. See how provincial exam, I haven't even touched a calculator, right? X, where would you see x's of a half? Those spots. So then the degree, you're looking for degree number. What would this be, 60? And 300. Okay, so there's your 4 answers to the angle. Okay, and formally, it's okay if you write it like this, but obviously formally would be like B equals, right? That's what this would be, because B is considered the angle variable at this point. Okay, number 2. I can't solve this as it is right now because I have sines in this, cosines in this. It's weird like that. Can I make any replacement? So can I replace sine squared with something? Can I replace cos with something? Which one of those two could I replace with? Okay, so this is a little bit new. And this comes from our top ones, and we actually haven't used any of this stuff up here yet. Okay, what is sine squared theta equal to? Can you move this around? How would you isolate it? You would have to move this out, right? 1 minus cos squared theta. Okay, everybody last year liked to have that written on the formula sheet. Can you do the same with cos squared? So in this equation, if you could get cos squared alone, what would you do there? Now you would have to move the sine out. Hello? Yep. With your car keys, you're supposed to go to the office. What kind of parking did you do?
I didn't park. My brother needed his wallet.
Oh, that's fine.
That part of the job or what?
Nah, I put my brother's wallet.
Okay, is that how you moved it around? 1 minus sine would have been the cos? Why don't we just go ahead and do all of these? Because then it's all on your sheet. So if you could move this around, tan squared theta would be secant squared theta minus 1. Right, if I moved it in that way. And the other version would be if I wanted 1 alone. 1 could be secant squared theta minus tan squared theta. Does this make sense that every single equation kind of has 3 variations if you want to isolate? And then in the last one, if I wanted cotangent squared alone, and if I wanted 1 alone. Okay, you can have this on your sheet when you're working, but once you get your test, remember that those aren't on there again, right? So you can do that yourself though. Yeah, I saw people write, as soon as they got their exam, this was one thing that they liked to write on there. Okay, ready to make our replacement. so sine squared is equivalent to 1 subtract cos squared. So I'm going to take that and replace it with 1 minus cos squared of t, because that's my variable. Be careful with your variables. Then I'm going to times it by 2, which means I better put it in brackets. Brackets are important. If you don't have brackets, it's wrong. Okay, that's the only new thing you're learning today. You know how to do the rest. So what should I do? Well, first of all, I'm going to distribute that bracket out. What kind of algebra do you want to do now? Is there anything you can isolate? Got nothing to isolate, right? I got 2 different variable types. So I should do what again? I need it equals 0 on one side. Squareds are the bosses. You know what I don't like? I don't like negative squareds. So I'm going to go that way. 0 equals, so positive 2 cos squared, positive 3 cos t, and then subtract 2. You see all my moves? Whatever I moved, I changed signs on, and if it didn't move, it stayed the same sign. Okay, then the next question would be, can you factor? So this should be a complex trinomial, so let's test it out here. 2 cos t and a cos t. Have to have that. And these numbers at the end have to multiply to 2. So 1 and 2 or 2 and 1. You got to play around. How would you get a FOIL with a 3? What do you want to do there? Where would you like to put the 1 and the 2? I think I have to do a +4 and a -1 on that. Out. On the outs I did a 4. On the ins, I did a 1. You see it? Okay, so cos t equals positive 1 over 2. Cos t equals negative 2.
Well, it's technically I mean, it's still a cookie. Come on. Get in then.
Okay, I'm going to answer this one first because it's quick. What is the answer on this guy?
Use mercy.
Yeah, no solution. Remember, cos can't have trig values beyond the borders of the -1 and 1 zone, right? Ooh, unit circle. Don't need my calculator. I'm looking at x values of 1/2. Guess what? It's in the same spots as our last answer, except this. Radians. The radians. I have to have radian answers, so then we do a what? Pi over 3 and is that a 5 pi over 3? Okay, last one. So what would you make a replacement on, this tan squared or the secant? What can you make replacements with? Squareds, okay? Squareds give away the hints because all this stuff up here is squareds. So tan squared t can be replaced with, did you find it from your sheet up top? Okay, so there's your replacement. Now, don't forget there'd be a 2 in the front of it. This is very similar to our last question, so can you distribute, collect, zero it out? Can you do those steps on your own? Collect, distribute, collect. Okay, algebra time. We're looking at factoring again. So 2 secant t and a secant t. Play around with where to put a 1 times a 2 there so that you get a negative 3 this time. Actually, last time we had a positive 3, this time we have a negative 3. Do you see your FOIL components? So have you noticed these complex trinomials that I give you aren't too complexy, that you could probably play around with a few options and get it? Okay, so now trig value time. So secant t equals negative 1 over 2. And secant t equals positive 2. Okay, we don't go to secant. What should we change secant into? Remember that? Cos of t would be negative 2. If we change this, it would go cos of t equals 1/2. Guess what this answer is? No solution. Nice. And look at this. I didn't mean to put all the questions answers into the same spot, but there's cos values of 1/2. Same spot. Different answer though. Why? How do we answer? You need the 2 pi k on this time. So that's a different question. So pi over 3 plus 2 pi k kei. Okay, I'm going to just recap one quick thing with you, because did you notice how none of this was calculator stuff? They all happen to get on the unit circle. So let's just go through the process. What if it's not on the unit circle? So this is an example of something you would get to not on the unit circle. What do? So if your trig value is not on the unit circle, what's your process? Step 1. Astica is step 1. Where are you going to go? Bottoms. Sign bottoms. Step 2. Put your calculator in your hand now, because you can't do it on the unit circle. What kinds of things should I start with? You should acknowledge this. Your answer is going to be in radians. So now your calculator is in radians. Then what do you exactly push? Sine inverse of no negatives, right? No negatives. Sine inverse of positive 1/3. So your calculator is giving you 0.3398 radian. but that's just how much reference. So do you remember what to do to get this number? Pi plus, and then this one would be 2 pi minus. Do you remember all those steps as well? So really, you're going through your checklist of, should we make a checklist? Is that the back side of your notes, or do you have a blank? That was black. Is there a blank page on the back of your? Okay, is there a blank page on your book 1 or something? This you. No. Something with a blank page on it. What is it? Book 1 has blank on the back?
Yeah.
Go to book 1, put a blank page. Trig equations. Here's what we did. Formula sheet replacement. We made a formula sheet replacement. Step 2, we distributed if we needed to, or collected if we needed to, right? We might not have to, but we might have to. Number 3, you would go to your algebra branch, which says one variable, isolate. If you have one variable, you probably won't have one variable in these ones, but if you had 2 variables involved, you should do what? Equals it to 0. Then you would factor question mark. Can it factor? So what are you looking for? GCF, simple, complex, difference of squares. If it doesn't factor, quadratic formula. I saw some of you using the quadratic formula on factorable ones. That's fine, it works, right? Okay, it's just that if it's on a part where it's not calculated on your exam, probably got to know how to factor. Once you're done that, do you understand that you would get a trig value? All that step gets you a trig value. So don't quit there, because all that work was just for trig values. So now you jump into the angle mode thing.
Are those supposed to be eyebrows or?
It's exclamation mark turned into a smiley face.
I'm just not sure if it's like
Don't.
eyebrows or
How's
hair. Can't quite decide.
Ears.
it's an exclamation point? Cat ears, bunny ears, whatever. I didn't say I was an art teacher.
True enough.
Beyond math, my skills don't go very far besides math and phys ed. Art, no. English, no.
The smile's pretty good though.
Okay, so step 4. Now we're into trig solving, angle. So what's the first thing I think about with my angle? Is it on the unit circle? So I'm just going to go like this. Now it's angle time. So the first thing you would go is on the unit circle. Okay, and then you would know what to do, right? If it's on the unit circle, you figure out where the angle is. So what do you do if it's not on the unit circle? You would astica locate. You would inverse. You would do an inverse, right? And then you would do your final. And then your final is always things like 0 plus, pi minus, pi plus, 2 pi minus, or 180, right? Whatever you're working in. So that's kind of how you do your final. Can you handle all those steps? That's everything you're going through every time. Checklist. Do I have this, 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 this?